Yo, what is up, y'all? Welcome to the Father Built Podcast. This podcast is all about building up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness, and giving them the tools to build their house of legacy. I'm your host, Bobby Peacock, and welcome to the next episode. I'm losing count. I think we're on six, something like that. I'm not sure. But man, it's good to be here. Last week was an amazing episode featuring Nathan Hofer. Man, we talked a lot of stuff about being an entrepreneur. We talked about just some mental health things in regards to grief and him losing his child or a child, Noel, and man, he really went in. And so part of this episode is we're going to break down some of those things that he specifically talked about with grief. But this episode's going to take a little bit different of a road, if you will. We're going to go down a little different path, and that's okay. That's okay. I want to let you guys know that this episode is also going to be probably the most controversial episode that I have put out. And so there are going to be a little bit of trigger warnings. And yeah, so we're just going to go ahead and jump into this episode. So let's go. I guess I got one more disclaimer here. I did a couple weeks of research and made sure to fact check some of the things that I'm talking about in this episode as well. So I'm learning as you have a podcast and as you are being a voice on social media or just in general, YouTube, social media, this podcast, you have to fact check everything. You can't just say things. And so there was a lot of research. So without further ado, we can officially jump into this episode. So I'm going to compare some things in this episode. If you're watching this podcast, you're going to see me looking down at my iPad because this is where my notes are. And if you're listening, well, you don't have to worry about that. So, so I want to share some interesting facts for y'all. So here we go. Did you know that Men's Mental Health Month has been around since 1994? And this was started from the Men's Health Network, which is a nonprofit organization, and they were responsible for saying, hey, in June, we're going to say that this is Men's Mental Health Month. Now, this month really started because they wanted to bring awareness to men's physical health and also their mental health. All right. Now, like I said, we're going to get a little controversial, trigger warnings. Also in 1994, there was a teacher by the name of Rodney Wilson at a Missouri high school that he wanted to celebrate the LGBT at that time community. And so he devoted October as LGBT History Month. Fast forward to 1999, the Clinton administration made June Pride Month. And in some ways, it made sense because if you look back into history, which I'm not going to get back into, there were some significant things that happened within the Pride community that they wanted it this specific month. Okay. Now, I want to break down a couple more things for you. So I searched How many days celebrate men? How many days celebrate women? And then how many days celebrate the pride community? So let's start with men. So there's Men's Mental Health Month. Within Men's Mental Health Month, there's Men's Mental Health Week. There's Father's Day. You can say maybe No Shave November. And then maybe Valentine's Day. Women, there are 17 plus days that are either quote unquote holidays or days to represent women. Pride community, there are 22 plus holidays that represent the pride community. So the question is, why am I bringing all of these things to the table? I think, and this may be a controversial statement, I think in a lot of ways, men can be overlooked. And you're thinking, what? Did he really just say that? And I know there's some people that are going to be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Men have everything. Men have this, that, and they have the whole world at their fingertips. It's easy for men to get jobs and this and that, which, yes, there's probably facts behind that. But I think sometimes it can be perceived that men are not appreciated because they have quote unquote the world at their fingertips. In a lot of ways, our system is probably definitely built more for men, but in other ways, our system has some major holes in it. I mean, I think about like the court system. Majority of courts in divorce favor mothers over fathers. And I'm not going to jump into that. We'll do that in a different podcast, which I'm super excited about. That's coming down the pipeline. But that is a thing. I look at another controversial statement here. I look at the history within the black communities and how the government took men out of the home and started paying women because the men were not in the home. Like the conversation in my mind went a little bit something like this. Hey, we can pay you a certain amount of money a month, but your man can't be in the house. And so I feel like there's a history that is good for men, but there's also the ugly side of things that is not so good for men. And the reason why I'm taking this podcast a little bit slower and pacing and taking pauses is because, like, I know I'm going to get raked over the coals in some communities for even bringing some of this stuff up. There's going to be some people who are going to clip a certain part of the video that they found on YouTube to argue it, or it's going to get taken out of context. And like, it is what it is. I got homies that have my back, so I shouldn't even be worried about this, but it's just a concern that I have. So moving on. Can we talk about suicide rates within men? Did you know in the United States, men consistently have a higher suicide rate than women across all ages? Now, this data comes from the CDC. And in 2019, the suicide rate for males was about 3.7 times higher than for females. 3.7 times higher. That's almost 4 times higher than females. But here's the thing, as men, this is kind of where we need to take ownership. This is where we got to talk about, why are the suicide rates higher, 3.7 times higher than women's? So, let's talk about the research that I did. Did you know that men are less likely to seek help for mental health issues due to what it looks like to the public? Source: Mental Health America. Men are more likely than women to turn to substance abuse as a coping mechanism for mental health issues. Source: National Institute on Drug Abuse. Men are more likely to experience social isolation and loneliness, which can contribute to mental health issues. Source: Harvard Health Publishing. Men often face significant stress related to their roles as providers and breadwinners, and source: American Psychology and Association. Depression and anxiety are prevalent among men, but they often go unrecognized. Why? Because we rather face other people's problems than our own. We rather deal with the stresses of the outwardly world that we are facing than our inwardly world that's within us. So let me try to say that again. We rather face the problems of this world than the problems inside of us. And in the last episode, Nathan really talked about this. He talked about the reality of pausing with his thoughts and being alone with his thoughts so that he can focus on his healing. But the reality is that not a lot of men, one, either don't know how to do that, or two, refuse to do that. And so this is why it's important to recognize, for me, as a man, as a father, to recognize this month as Men's Mental Health Month. So, if you haven't heard it, happy Men's Mental Health Month. But the reason why it's important is because there are so many of these issues within men that are so often overlooked, underplayed, and we do not know how to talk about it as men. We rather sit there and not deal with it because of our pride, because of we have to be the big strong one, instead of like, hey, like in the Bible, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And so this is where I get a little bit stern in the podcast. For men, we have to step up. We have to grow. We have to be okay with our emotions. I think about like when we see men in movies and men, in a whole like generations right before us of like, and even John Setzer talked about this of like, oh man, like, hey, suck it up kind of attitude, right? You start crying, your dad says, suck it up. And then we pass that down to the next generation where our sons start crying or whatever. And we don't ask, like, hey, what emotions are you feeling? Because we don't know how to navigate through even our emotions, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a difference between a mother's love and a father's love, right? Those there are those specific gender roles where it comes back to masculinity and femininity, right? But within masculinity also is teaching our kids on how to navigate and walk through their emotions. But we can't do that if we aren't learning to do that ourselves. Like, there's a reason why the suicide rate is higher within men. There's a reason why we don't want to, as men, see health professionals. But what if we could figure out a way to flip the script? What if we can figure out the way to say, you know what? I am more than a statistic. And so, thus far, I'm going to drop my pride. I'm going to drop my arrogance. I'm going to drop what the world may think about me. And I'm going to go see a counselor. I tell you what, I've heard it said, I think like 2 or 3 times from just women out in the public, that there's one of the most attractive things in a man is him willing to see a counselor. That is an attractive quality, because not only and I'm not trying to speak for women, but I'm speaking from what I've heard. Like, women are not only attracted to, like, masculinity within a strong sense, but they're also attracted to emotional awareness. Um, and not only emotional awareness, but also emotional maturity. And so for us as men, it comes back to us. We have to step up. We have to get help. Now, I'm going to offer some tools, a couple of tools that I believe can help you own this. Because at the end of the day, we can make excuses, right? Like, for me, I grew up in the foster system. I can play the poor me mentality, and I can sit in my garbage and in my crap. But at the end of the day, that's a poor me mentality, and I don't have time for that. Like, I don't. Like, I need to be a bull. There's men that need to be built instead of, like, I don't know what the opposite of built is. Destroyed. I don't know. But there are men that need to be the bull, the built, instead of being the coward, the cow. And when I say coward, I mean it's cowardly not to deal with your emotions. It's cowardly to be prideful. But I'm gonna get personal with y'all. Like, I think about me, and I got called out on this too, multiple times. I have what I would like to say the Superman complex. Where it's like, hey, like, some of it comes from, like, having a pastor's heart and an evangelistic heart. But basically what this means is that I rather help people and really, really, really focus on people, and then put their problems ahead of my problems, and then I'll deal with my problems when I get there. But the reality is, for me, like, if we take a cup and let's say there's a person my cup is full, but let's say there's a person's cup that is half full. And then I start giving them some of my knowledge, some of my discernment, some of my 31-year-old wisdom, right? And I start pouring that into that cup, right? And then there's another person that comes and their cup is even more empty. So I start pouring it into their cup as well. And then I go to another person and I start pouring into their cup. Eventually my cup will be drops. And so if I don't have the Lord speaking into me and going to the source and allowing the Holy Spirit to work through me, my cup is going to be depleted. And so I need something to pour into me, which starts with the spiritual side. But then I also need to understand that I need a community of brothers to also pour into me so that I can go out and pour into others. Right? And so for me, that's like the Superman complex that I struggle with, of like, I want to pour into so many people, but like those people are not necessarily pouring back into me. And if I don't go back to my community, or if I don't go back to the Lord and pray and read the Bible, then I'm only giving them a little bit of me. Or if I'm not facing my problems, then my cup might get like tainted with poison, and now all of a sudden I'm seeping poison on this person and poison on this person without even it knowing, because someone stuck me with kryptonite. And so that's the whole Superman complex thing that I struggle with. And so for me, it's just like, no, I gotta stop. I gotta take care of myself. I gotta take care of myself before I can take care of others. And like, for example, the Bible even talks about this, right? It says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a pastor friend of mine says it this way: who in the world do we love more? Who in the world do we love the most? And the reality is that we love ourselves the most. Sometimes it's selfish in nature, of giving into the flesh, trying to fill a void. But then the other part is we love ourselves the most. And so like for me, and part of that too is like, it's okay to love yourself. Like give yourself permission to love yourself. Because like for me, I want to love the Lord the most. Then I want to love me really, really well. And then after that, if I get married, then I want to love my wife really well, and then my son. But right now it's like, I want to love the Lord with all my heart, soul, and mind, and even body. I want to love myself the best. And then I want to love my son the most. And then all other relationships, there's an order to all the other relationships. But here's the reality, is sometimes that we can put like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna love myself before I love God. Or I'm gonna love those people before I love myself. And so then those people who may be negatively impacting you, well, you're loving them and you're not taking care of yourself. And even for me, there's areas that I struggle with loving myself in. Like, listen, I'm 280 280 to 290 pounds. Like, I should be at 245. I'm not loving myself physically, and I'm not willing to sacrifice the one body that I have and take my physical health seriously until recently, where I'm just like, I can't live this way. Like, my son deserves better. The Lord deserves better. Right? And most of the people be like, well, Bobby, you don't even look that big. And I know I'm a dense kid. as I tell people, I'm a dense man. Like, but yet it's not the healthiest. And so I have to sacrifice. By loving yourself, you have to sacrifice things now so that you can get the things that you want in the future. There's that whole Dave Ramsey quote that I always mess up. Just look up Dave Ramsey fancy quotes. And so I want to bring light to these issues. That, like, men, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, man, like, I am dying, I am stressed out, I am struggling. Well, let me give you some tools. I'm going to give you like 5 tools that can help. So let's break down these 5 tools. And if you made it this far, I appreciate y'all listening. And, like, if you have any questions, I'm not a professional counselor. I'm just me, and I believe in men. I believe in masculinity, living masculinity out in a true biblical fashion. And so, like, if you have any questions for me, feel free to hit me up on Instagram at fatherbuilt or at DJ underscore Peacock, and I'd love to have a conversation. And I also go check out Dad Nation Co. This dude's an awesome dude, and he has a podcast as well, and he wants to help men as well. And so, yeah, there are a lot of sources out there that want to help men. You just have to find them, and you have to take the time. So anyways, so I want to give you guys 5 tools that have helped me and that can potentially help you. And then there's also potentially some bonus tools. So let's jump into the first tool. So the first tool is a positive community. And that goes back to how I view friendships. I have 12 homies. I have my inner 3, and then I have my inner 1. Those are my dudes. Those are my guys. Those are my positive community, where if I need help with finances or accountability in that area, I can go to one of my guys and say, hey, I need help in this area. Or another one would be like I have a friend that literally asks me, like, every time we meet, okay, hey, when's the last time you watched porn? When's the last time you had sex? Because I want to keep myself to a moral standard. And so have the people in your life that are a positive community and brothers, not brothers and sisters. Yes, you can have women that can speak into your life. I allow 2 women to speak into my life. I mean, outside of like my mom and stuff, and they have permission to speak into my life as a mentor role, and also as like a accountability role, just because I do want to have a woman's perspective. And so actually I should say 3. There's 3, not 2. But there are like really strong, super strong boundaries within those relationships, like super strong, because I ain't about crossing boundaries. But if you're like just starting out on your journey, find your 3 ride or dies that can pour into you, that can hang out with you, that can build you up, and that can hold you accountable. But also don't lose sight on the the fun side of things. Like I have brothers that or friends that are all over the country now, and we used to be a band of brothers. Um, like when we were working at church, we were a band of brothers, man. It was awesome. And like we're in a group chat together, and literally all we do is send funny memes or funny stories or interesting stories to each other, and that's how we stay connected. Um, but then every once in a while, like there's times where one of us may be going through crap and hardship and pain, um, and we'll text a group, and the group's like, "Hey, we'll pray for you. Uh, Let me give you a call. Hey, is there anything I can do for you?" And so that's what I'm talking about, positive community, and don't forget about the fun. Now the second thing, and they'll come down. The second one will have some bonuses in it. Is positive self care, whatever that may look like for you. Now there is negative self care that can come up as quote unquote positive self care, like for example going to the bar and having fun and getting drunk. Sorry, at the end of the day, that's substance abuse, and that's not healthy, and that's negative. You may see it as a positive, but let me tell you, it is a negative. It is you going to have fun, but there's an underneath issue that you are not facing because you're going to the bottle. And so, positive self care. So, let me bring it back to me. Positive self care is me going to the gym. Positive self care is me reading the Bible. Positive self care is me reading books on how to better myself. Spending time in worship, spending time in prayer. Obviously, I'm and y'all know this, that my lens and how I see the world is from a biblical worldview. So everything stems from that spiritual realm or that holiness realm. But then healthiness is like, okay, positive care is like, man, Bobby, don't be eating those snacks. Instead, why don't you get some peanut butter and some oats and put a little bit of honey in there for the sweetness and call that it. That's your snack. Positive self-care is eating healthy things. So all of these things are all about positive self-care. What does that look like for you? Third one is journal. Journal, or oh, let me jump back to positive self care. Positive self care is also dropping your pride and going to see a counselor. That's positive self care. Someone to help you walk through these things. Okay. Third is journal, whether it's like a voice memo or whether it's like actually sitting down and writing your feelings out. I think about like journals used to be passed down from generation to generation to generations, and some of those journals were in forms of books. And so imagine you're journaling not just for you, but you're journaling in a way for your legacy, right? And so part of that is like, man, this is my journal, and one day I'm going to give it to my son, and he's going to learn how to deal with some of the things that I dealt with. If he gets angry, oh, hey, in 2024, May 5th of 2024, man, today I was really angry. This is how I dealt with it, but this is how I should have dealt with it. And then fast forward to 100 years from now, someone, a grandkid or a great grandkid, struggles with anger, and he picks up your journal and he reads that. The legacy, that's legacy. And so, but most importantly, journal for you. Make time for the journal. And fourth, this is given. Drop the pride. Just drop it. That is the one thing that is holding you back the most, is your pride and arrogance. Pride and arrogance are leading to these statistics. Pride in not dealing with your hurt. Pride in not dealing with the underlying issues or the core issues or the root causes, and saying, I'm big macho man, no, drop that. It's okay for men to be sensitive. It's okay for men. There's, within sensitivity, there's masculinity. You can find it. You can find it. Now, I'm not saying that we need a whole bunch of weak men out there, but I'm saying we also don't need a lot of emotionalists, or whatever that word, men that don't have emotions out there as well, right? And so it is a balance, because like Nathan talked about this, is that you can have a man that's a brute, but emotionally, like, he is not there. Or you can have a man who is very built and emotionally there. And so navigating those emotions and navigating, not running from them, and honestly, it makes you a better man, because there's a lot of men out there that can escalate a situation real quick. But how many men can de-escalate a situation and navigate their emotions within that de-escalation? There should be a book somewhere out there, The Art of De-Escalation. That would be really cool. So drop the pride, drop the arrogance, find a way to figure that out. And then the fifth, and this is for all my believers out there, hallelujah, amen, let's go. And this is probably the most important one. This is a foundational thing. This comes back to holiness, which is pray and seek the Lord and seek the Bible. Like, if you don't know who Jesus is, or you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I'm telling you, seek him out, because it's going to change your life. You're going to see things in a different perspective. I have seen him turn people from being drug dealers to traffickers to all of these things, these negative things, and completely do a 180. Like, there's one person that I'm going to have on this podcast that I'm talking with, that his story is absolutely crazy. And God took him from this negative lifestyle, and he came into church, and God found him and completely just, I'm telling you, 180. And so for me, it's just like, man, if I'm not going to the Lord daily, if I'm not seeking his presence, and sometimes, just to be honest, I lose sight of that. There's been conversations with the Lord that I'm just like, God, I don't want to talk to you right now, and I'm just going to go run this way. And God's just all like, I'll have an ambulance waiting for you. But then there's so often I come to the Lord in my brokenness and my pain and my hurt, and God's like, man, I got you. Read this Bible verse, or he gives me this Holy Spirit thought. And so, yeah, so seek the Lord, pray, so let me break this down, because I want to go back to number 2 again. So number 1, positive community. Number 2, positive self-care, whatever that may look like. And I think the other thing about number 2 is also having fun in a positive manner. Go to a movie. Go hang out with your homies. Go hit the dance floor. That's what I do. Go hit the dance floor, kind of thing. Number 3, journal. Be honest. Number 4, drop the pride. And number 5, pray and seek the Lord. At the end of the day, us as men, we have to take ownership. Even though in some ways the system is built for us, I believe in the area of mental health, the system is not built for us. The awareness is not built for us. And so in my mind, this is my way of saying, like, I see you men out there. Like, let's take ownership. Like, go up to someone this month, in the month of June, and say, yo, happy Men's Mental Health Month. How are you doing with your mental health? There's a guy that always asks me, he's not a father, and my air conditioning just turned on. He's not a father, but he's like, hey, when have you seen the doctor? Or when's the last time you worked out? And like, he's not even in my inner 12, but he cares. And so for men, let's step up. Let's take the bull by the horn. Like, let's trudge through that storm instead of being a cow and super arrogant and prideful and running away and letting the storm catch up with us. Like, come on. We're built for this. And so, yeah, I know a lot of this was not about a recap of Nathan's, of his podcast, but I think this is something that's important to talk about and something that's important to bring light to when it comes to men's mental health. And man, like, if you want to learn how to navigate grief, and pain and hurt, like, go back and listen to Nathan Hofer's podcast, because he talked about sitting with the emotions and feelings, and I think that's important for us as men to learn how to do so that we can help others. So once again, thank you guys so much for listening to the Father Built podcast. Like I said earlier in this podcast, you can follow the Father Built on Instagram. You can follow me personally at DJ_Peacock on Instagram. Same on TikTok. And then just Bobby Peacock on Facebook. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the Father Built podcast, where we build up fathers in holiness, healthiness, and happiness. And we give fathers the tools to build their house of legacy. So how are you going to build your house of legacy? Thanks so much. And always remember, peace, love, blessings. We out.